Back when I was in high school, all we had was blackboards and chalk. Oh, and it was uphill to school. Both ways. The phones, guess what? They were mounted on the wall. I'll never forget the sound of chalk or the taste. But we're not here to talk about the old days. No, we're here to talk about whiteboards. Well, really whiteboarding, which doesn't even have to be on an actual board. No, today we're going to learn about whiteboarding as a concept and how it can be used in building software. What do I mean by whiteboarding? Well, it's the concept of using a medium to convey an idea or collect information or even facilitate a conversation. Think of it like a tool that can be used to assist in communication when working with others. When whiteboarding, you could be creating a list of things to do, or maybe you're sketching up a UI for a website, or you could even be designing a system using diagrams. You could be doing this alone or with a team that's co-located, or even online with people around the world. So let's say you're tasked with creating an address book application and business has already given you all the requirements and they're like, here you go ahead, build this thing. Well, there's all these different parts that have to come together to make a cohesive application. To make sense of this, drawing it out and creating a diagram actually can make things a lot easier for you. And that, in a sense, is whiteboarding. If I were to whiteboard this system, and given it's a smartphone application, I would go up to the whiteboard and I would draw a vertical rectangle. And then I would start creating the UI. I'm a very visual person, so I go UI first. Some people could go data first and start creating a database. But if I was in a team environment, then I could have my team members come up and add to the UI or add to the data design. We're all putting things together in front of a whiteboard and coming up with something and creating the system and defining it, taking those requirements that business has given us, putting on a board, communicating, and establishing what we're supposed to build. You could even just take the list of requirements and write them out and then have discussion points on each of them, adding notes as you go along. Sure, you might just be drawing pictures on a whiteboard, but it's important to understand what whiteboarding really is. It's an interactive form of conversation facilitation. I mentioned earlier that whiteboarding doesn't even have to be on an actual board. It could be on a piece of paper or a napkin. You know how many ideas have been hashed out on a napkin? You could whiteboard on a blackboard, although I wouldn't recommend that. Sounds, smells, the taste. The medium could even be on a digital whiteboard. So the medium that you use is important. I mean, it's all about what you're trying to do. A napkin might work for you and another person, but I don't think it's going to work for a whole team sitting around a single napkin trying to say, oh, but what about this? And then someone comes along and adds it and it rips, and now your ideas are just, shredded. Whiteboards and blackboards are actually pretty great. They can be used solo or with a team or even a room full of people in a conference. I've actually seen whiteboarding used in conferences. It's actually kind of cool and it totally works. And of course, using a digital whiteboard just kind of gives you access to everything. You can be solo, or you can do it with people, or you can do it with Martians. As a developer, you're going to find yourself whiteboarding a lot. I find it really helpful to have a whiteboard or even a piece of paper nearby. You never know when something's going to come up that you need to write on the whiteboard, or you need to hash out an idea with a friend or a coworker. Maybe they're not your friend. Maybe they're just your coworker and their name is George and you're just like, George? I find that having a place to draw out your problems or your ideas makes for a better me. If you're working in a team environment, chances are you're going to have some sort of board to collaborate on. Whiteboarding can be a major part of team planning. I find that if a team doesn't have a whiteboard to collaborate on, then they're missing a very vital development tool. During your career, you're going to work with all kinds of different people across all kinds of different professions. Let's say that you're working with a UX designer. It's a lot easier to go up to a whiteboard and go back and forth with how the system should work, as opposed to emailing back and forth with pictures and responses saying, nope, that won't work. Working together in front of a board can just make the process go faster. I found myself whiteboarding with business, networking, clients, QA, even the dreaded HR. I found myself working with others in front of a board more often than not. Whiteboarding is a concept. The result of a whiteboarding session should be transferred to something more persistent if the outcome requires it. Drawings, diagrams, lists, well, pretty much anything that's put up on a board during a session should be considered temporary. If you're using paper, it could be thrown away or lost. And even if you're using a digital whiteboard where it automatically saves everything, I would still consider it temporary. If the outcome requires persistence, then just transfer it to something that is meant to hold that type of outcome. For example, let's say that you created a list of things to do. Well, I would consider moving that into some sort of software that tracks work. If you created diagrams, then put it into some diagram software. I highly recommend moving the things that need to be persistent to something that makes sense for that outcome. I've seen instances of whiteboarding sessions that have stayed up for so long that people have actually forgotten what it was there for. And when someone finally comes along and says, you know what, I'm gonna erase this stuff, grabs the eraser and is like, yeah, it doesn't do anything. It's like, and then you grab the spray and you're like, and it's not working. So you gotta like scrape it, you gotta elbow grease it, and then finally it comes out and it's like, man, I really wish I would have brought the WD-40, but no. So if you need to save the results of your whiteboarding session, just take a picture of it and then move it to somewhere more permanent at some other point in time. Also, it's important to understand that not everyone writes readable text and not everyone draws good pictures. Whiteboarding is a step in the process of a more fluid form of communication and documentation. Now that I've over-explained whiteboarding, what does an actual session look like? Let's use an example. Let's say we have a small team consisting of a business person, a few developers, and a couple QA people. Now, they're currently trying to plan their work that they need to do for the next week. In this example, everyone is sitting in a room, kind of scattered about, but everyone can see the whiteboard. In a session like this, typically there's someone at the board drawing out the ideas and the conversation as it goes along. There might be a time when a member comes up and decides to add a little something to, say, a diagram that they're doing. Maybe a QA person comes up to the board and draws a little arrow to a spot in the diagram and writes a little note about testing that needs to be done in that specific area. In this session, the team's goal is to figure out what work needs to be done for the week. And along the way, they're talking back and forth, trying to figure out any details that don't have enough information. And they bounce back and forth on the whiteboard trying to figure out what is missing. They want to make sure that by the end of the session, they have at least enough information to go out and start building what they're supposed to be building. At the end of the session, the business person might add some notes to the project software. Maybe the developers created some diagram and they'll move that into some diagramming software. The team might even have to go and take some documentation and adjust it or modify it based off of what they discussed. Whiteboarding is a form of communication. It's a facilitator. It's a temporary holding spot. It's a way to capture ideas, concepts, designs, and more. It can be done on a napkin by yourself. It could be done on a whiteboard with a team. And it could even be done online with an astronaut in space. The outcome of a session, if needed, can be moved to a more persistent medium. As a developer, you'll use the concept of whiteboarding in all aspects of your career. And you also do it with all kinds of different people across all kinds of different professions. I will say that even though you don't have to use a whiteboard, there's nothing more satisfying than popping the top off of a dry erase marker, giving it that smell, and then listening as it glides across that beautiful white screen. And that's it. So if you have any questions, put them down in the comments section. And if you haven't yet, hit the subscribe button because I think that helps me and it's good. And you can know when things are coming and going, I guess. Also, the blog, you'll be able to head over there. And there will be a lot more details. And I'll probably put some links to places to buy whiteboards and things like that. I don't know. So anyways, thanks for watching. And until next time, see ya. I drew me right here with a laptop and the Rocket Man went into space and I'm talking to him. We're whiteboarding.